r/AskReddit. What is the best you fed with the wrong person moment you've seen? Was riding the bus home from school one day. Bunch of arseholes messing around in the back throwing food and other junk. A quiet, overweight kid sat in front of them, minding his own business when one of the arseholes thought it would be funny to shove an old sandwich in his face and call him fat boy. Quiet kid stood up and knocked him out in a single hit. Then grabbed his bag and walked up to the front of the bus and got off at his stop as if nothing happened. There was a bully in my high school class who liked to pants other guys. His goal was usually to get both the pants and the boxers, leaving the victim's dick blowing in the breeze. After gym, the bully decided his target was a guy named Dan. Dan was a brilliant yet awkward guy. Definitely on the spectrum. Dan was a tall gangly guy and an easy target. However, Dan had a secret. He had just received his black belt in jiu-jitsu and was fully capable of absolutely fucking shit up. I think you see where this is going. Anyway, the bully struts up to Dan and yoinks his shorts down. Shorts, boxers, everything. Dan is left standing there fully on display with the whole class laughing at him. Dan calmly stepped out of his down shorts and put the bully into some crazy hold. Once he got the bully to squeal, he flipped him over his back onto the bleachers. The gym teacher saw the whole thing. The bully suffered a broken leg, missed out on his entire senior year of athletics, and was suspended. Dan received a warning not to break the legs of any more classmates. Me drunk AF on a party bus for my cousin's 21st. Being a complete ass because I was letting my brother who had issues with someone get me worked up on his drama. Got in a huge brawl outside of one of the stops and decided to take a shot at one of the guys I didn't like. Hit him with everything I had. I mean everything. I literally broke my fucking hand on his face. He got up, looked at me, and calmly said, "You just fucked up." He was right. Scrappy Chihuahua man road rages at me. I flip him off and pull into the grocery store parking lot. I needed to get formula for my daughter. He followed me. Oh dear. Get out of the car, effort. I'm gonna kick your ass. Okay. I'm 6'5 inches. Bald. Bearded. And since I lost weight and started lifting, I've been mistaken for similar looking NFL defensive lineman. I got out of my bright green Volkswagen Beetle, crossed my arms, and looked straight at him for about 10 seconds before he got back in his shitty little Honda and peeled out of the parking lot. Good thing too. I don't know how to fight, lol. Yuppie frat boy in an econ course I was taking my freshman year got caught cheating. At my university, we all sign a contract agreeing to their honor code policies, and cheating is an automatic expulsion. But the professor decided to be nice and was just going to give the kid a 0 on the exam. Frat kid doesn't think that's enough, and it turns into an argument. Kid starts saying how in his family is at the university, and how none of this matters because he'll just pull some strings. Long story short, our professor is actually close friends with the chancellor of our school. Not only did the kid get expelled from the school, but they somehow got him into legal trouble as well for some of the comments made in class that day. I don't know what was said that could have been used against him, but the kid ended up in some deep shit. Not witnessed in person, but this. TLDR. Two guys went on a stag do in Swansea dressed in drag. A couple of thugs decided to give them shit for it and took a swing at them. Turned out the two drag acts were professional cage fighters. Didn't end well for the troublemakers. I didn't witness it, but when I worked for AT&T, a gentleman and his wife came in because his son's iPhone 6 was bent. So, they wanted to get him a new phone. How did it get bent? Some turd held the boy up while he was walking home from school, taking his money and his phone. Both of his parents were retired police officers, and his father trained SWAT tactics and hand-to-hand combat. The son went home empty-handed and was initially scared to tell his parents because the thief told the boy he knew where he lived and threatened him. His parents eventually got him to tell them what happened. The thief was hanging out at a laundromat near their home when the robbery took place. The dad called his cop buddies who immediately rolled up to the laundromat along with the dad, where they apprehended the guy who still had the phone in his pocket. It got bent during the ensuing scuffle. Dude stole from the wrong kid. The kid was very polite and kind while in the store. He seemed pretty shook up. I was glad for him that his dad had his back. This is low-key, but I enjoyed it. My first week at a white-collar job, my first such job. And we were in the middle of a department-wide meeting, about 17 co-workers and supervisors all together. The person leading the meeting asks a question of no one in particular, and several of us answer. My answer differed from the rest. One guy turns to me and says, "Let's leave these questions to the people who actually have a master's degree. Shall we?" I looked at him and said, "I have a master's degree." The room went silent, except for one guy who loudly oohed I had given the correct answer. To top it off, friend of my brother's was this big dude. 6 feet 3 inches or 4 inches and maybe 275. Anyway, I always thought he was awesome, but he had been known to drink and act the fool. One night he comes over with a mouthful of stitches, like 30 top and bottom from his teeth. He's all embarrassed and my brother is busting up. Turns out he got bumped at the bar. Something innocuous. And gets in this guy's face. To hear my brother tell it, this dude was like a lean 5 feet 9 inches, and I guess he tried to talk my buddy down like a champ. But like I said, drunk asshole. Anyway, this guy had enough eventually and kicked my buddy right in the mouth from about a foot away. Busted him wide open. And he did about what you'd expect, whined and bled. Turns out the other guy was a champion kickboxer. This was the early 90s when martial artists weren't a dime a dozen, and he felt so bad about what he'd done he tried to drive my buddy to the ER. Dave, a customer politely inquiring about the status of his Avenger PlayStation 3 controller order. And Paul Cristoforo of Ocean Marketing, the PR lead for the product exchange emails. The rep for Ocean Marketing is a ranting lunatic and explains that they have a booth at PAX East that year and don't need to have good customer support. Mike Krahulik, the writer of Penny Arcade and owner of PAX East, gets involved and the ranting lunatic turns on him, apparently not knowing who he is. My grandpa was a NAM vet. Really nice guy. Kinda your typical portly boomer type. Well, one day we were at the mall and on the way back to the car some frat douche looking guy was walking along singing a dirty song comprised mostly of profanity. My grandpa told him, "Hey, there's kids around here. Watch your mouth." Guy sizes up my grandpa. Sees he's kinda old. Got a belly. And decides he's going to prove to his two buddies how tough he is by bowing up on an old man. He flexes his cute off-sleeved arms, juts his barbed wire tribal neck tattoo chin out, and kinda tries to chest bump my grandpa. My grandpa suddenly is in this perfect boxer stance and just rocks this guy in the gut. Frat dude goes down on his knees winded. And my grandpa says, "I said watch your mouth, boy." Guy starts to get up and say fuck you, but my grandpa puts a left hook into his face and a right punch into his neck under his ear, and the dude goes down spread eagle and out cold. My grandpa steps over him walking towards his two buddies. Who book it? We got in the car and he made me promise not to tell my mom. Watching my 72-year-old father beat the piss out of a guy who tried to steal my mom's purse. It was like a shopping center like thing. A popular one in England called Trafford Centre. There were these two very built up men. Obviously bodybuilders, getting quite heated and looking like they were about to throw hands. A small crowd had gathered around. One of them threw a punch, and the other one returned with a revenge blow. Security came and sort of hesitated as the size of these men was triple of the biggest security guard they had. This is when some old woman, maybe 80 early 90s, stepped between them and scolded them. It's not really a fooed with the wrong person moment, but you're not going to punch a little old woman. Back in the 1980s, I took a commercial tour in Africa. A local cop in an obscure town decided that accusing a group of American tourists of illegally photographing a police station would be a good way to ingratiate himself with the local commandant. So he arrested us and hauled us off to see the commandant, who was not amused. To save face, he agreed to let us go after we swore we wouldn't sell pictures of the police station to American newspapers. It didn't hurt that we, on the tour leader's advice, were loudly demanding that he call the American ambassador. We learned later that things did not go well for the local cop. The tour organizer was a European who was best friends with a man considered a national hero in that country. The organizer had contracted with a local company to do the logistics for the tour. The local company was owned by National Hero's brother. Local guide made a call. National Hero made a call. Commandant understood which side his bread was buttered on. An IFBB pro bodybuilder was at a nightclub hanging out. And a fight broke out. An angry large man, probably 230 pounds, over 6 feet tall, tried to shove him in the commotion. I watched him pick the guy up like Simba, carry him out on the street, and chuck him onto the sidewalk like he was an old cabbage. We were in the funeral procession on a back road, headed to the cemetery for my uncle's graveside service. This jackwagon in his Pose mobile comes speeding up a side road, breaks the line, and decides to pass everyone using the left lane. He was a real jackass, and totally disrespectful. When he overtook the hearse, his day took a downturn, as he forced one of the 8 motorcycle escorts off the road. It was at this point he found that there were hundreds of police cars following behind the family. My uncle was a high-ranking deputy sheriff, and basically every local police officer, state trooper, and deputies from over 50 counties were attending that funeral. When his car disappeared in the rearview mirror, he was gently being taken into custody and placed into the back of a deputy's cruiser by several Leos. I was on vacations few years ago, and one day I see a man running away from some lady chasing him, and suddenly 3 guys appear out of nowhere and one of them punches that man in the face. I still remember the sound of that punch. Then one of them started calling the police while the other 2 were making sure the man doesn't get up. Later I found out that the man was a child molester and he was asking weird questions to children of that lady who was later chasing him. In 7th grade my friend was self-conscious about his weight. One day at lunch, I was watching him and another friend chasing each other. I forgot why they were. The one friend said, "You can't catch me, fatus." And the next thing I knew, there was a loud smack and the kid was on the grass with a bloody nose. My mom told me this story about my dad about when they were young, newly married. I don't think an adult could necessarily get away with this in American helicopter parent culture these days. But this happened in the late 70s. My dad was a restaurant manager and had to fire a high school kid. He lived in the same neighborhood as my parents and would often see my dad when he and his friends were driving to school. They would flip my dad off and yell things at him. One day my dad got sick of it all and drove to their school, found them trying to park, used his car to block them, got out and went up to the kid's car window and told him, "If you ever flip me off again, I'm going to rip that finger off and shove it up your ass." The kid stopped flipping him off. Not seen, but heard. A few years ago, the family gathered at an aunt's house for Christmas or some other suitable event, and I was chilling out with my assorted cousins. One of my cousins, 6 feet 1 inches, male, was telling us about this time that his sister, probably 5 feet 4 inches, got bag snatched. Now, I suspect it was because my cousin is 5 feet 4 inches. The dude probably thought she was an easy target or something. So she came home all battered and bruised with a fat lip. And my cousin, her brother, asked her what the hell was going on. She said some guy tried to jump her and steal her handbag. Now, these 2 cousins, and their father, my uncle, are all black belts in various forms of martial art. My cousin decked her would-be attacker while they fought over her bag and she beat him off with a bloody nose and then came straight home. This is the same cousin who is terrified of tiny spiders and once refused to get out of the car until her brother had killed a spider on the windshield. My uncle is a 5 feet 4 inches little ball of concentrated muscle, spit, and vinegar packed so tightly it makes his temper super dense and hot like a massive star. On top of that, he has a bit of a drinking problem. I've seen him walk into fights with everyone around us thinking he is going to die, only to see him victoriously dragged away in handcuffs after putting some poor sap in the hospital. Needless to say, he is in prison quite a bit. And from how often he doesn't make parole, I assume he fights a ton in there too. I think this is relevant. I was jumped in a Kroger parking lot late at night while I was on my way to my car. I only had one bag. Here's the thing. I had just gotten out of basic training for the infantry. All that ground fighting techniques training was fresh still, and I ended up breaking his shit with a straight arm bar. Then I ran like a bitch, leaving him there screaming. Drove to a gas station and called the cops. Most of this I learned secondhand as it occurred. When I was younger, me dad bought some oil field royalties. Percentage ownerships of what is produced. That gave a check each month for a few $100. Well, as time goes by, the checks begin to dwindle and then stop. At this point he began to look into the company that operated the oil field and received a significantly less than satisfactory answer. At this point they really should have just given him the checks each month. Because at his point he proceeded to look into the company and peel back a metric shit ton of fraud and other deceptions. Over the course of a 7-year litigation case, my dad figured out exactly how they were committing fraud, and after working with a few lawyer friends hit them with the bitch slap of God in court, which removed their operator's license for oil wells and promptly thereafter they went out of business. He ruined a $50 million company because they tried to screw him out of a few $100s a month. Happened on my behalf. I went to my community college for my BTEC, that's a bit like an associate's degree, and there were a few mature students in my class. There was one guy named Dave. Dave was the kind of guy that was so big he loomed. He was also a super nice guy, and I helped him out with his coursework because he was trying to get into the IT industry. Well, at the time I was this skinny runt of a 17-year-old. And one day I'm minding my own business and some other student starts trying to push me around. All of a sudden a shadow appears between the two of us. Dave just taps him on the shoulder. No, you don't touch him. He's my friend. You understand? Never had any trouble again. Go to say. Every skinny nerd needs a friend like Dave. Middle school. Back in the early 90s. Los Angeles. When gangs were running rampant. We had this big son of a bitch named Phil. Easily one of the biggest 8th graders at the school. Anyway, one day at pay, he comes storming out of the locker room and marches right over to this little gangster who he says stole his money. This little dude thinks he's hot shit because he's a gangster and starts yakking. 2 of his homies hear him yakking and come to his side. Now Phil has 3 gangsters in his face threatening him to do something. Well, Phil did something. He fucking obliterated these 3 boys in less than a minute. I mean, he was pounding on them and throwing them all over the place. Hell, even some of their friends were running over and punching Phil trying to get him off. Nope. Phil kept on going. By the time the coaches came to separate them, there were 3 gangsters with bloody noses and faces. All fucked up. And there was Phil just huffing and puffing without a scratch. Lesson from that day. Don't fuck with Phil. 7th grade. New kid in school. I forgot his name. But he looked like the douche from 10 Things I Hate About You. He gets egged on to fight the special education kid. We'll call him Kendall. Sweet kid. Down syndrome. Took a long time for him to agree to meet douche nozzle behind the band hall. He does. Douchelor dances in front of half the student body. And gets deflected and destroyed. Every punch he threw turned into a throw or a joint lock. He got tossed and pushed away 4 times. Before on the 5th time, Kendall locks him up again. Turns him around and then pumps his family jewels into his throat. Kendall was a very quiet man. Used to be involved with some shady people. Great guys though. We were all taking charges of GHB, juice. The date rape drug. Can be used recreationally, and one guy snuck some into a girl's drink later that night. One of my friends saw and told my friends. They tied the guy to the bottom of the host's couch and left him there for 2 days without food or water. Here where I live, it's a small country community and everyone knows everyone. Had neighbors over for a BBQ. And the one guy everyone knows as an asshole, who was not invited, shows up drunk. He proceeded to get mouthy and obnoxious and was asked to leave. He vocally declared that he would not leave until he was ready to, and there wasn't a moth earth here that could make him. Upon his 3rd time yelling out there's not a moth earth here, he got my full attention. He's maybe 160 pounds. I'm a solid 300. I can pick up the rear bumper on a S10 pickup and get the rear tires off the ground fairly easy. I chased him out to the middle of the yard and got nose to nose with him. I think I had spooked him a little when I told him that he had successfully gained this moth earth's full attention and I would put him in his truck. and not be nice and courteous and open the door when I do it. He had instant look of horror on his face and took off running out the driveway. Yes. Running for his life apparently, as he had left his truck. He sent our truck to pick it up the next day, and none of my neighbors have had any problems with him since. I only know this by stories, but after Vietnam my grandpa became a door-to-door salesman. One time a person called him on the phone and told him that she was interested in his product. When he came to the house, a woman opened the door and told him to come in. As soon as he did, my grandpa, a man behind the door, presumably the woman's spouse boyfriend, pulled a gun to my grandpa's head. Well, this happened a short time after Vietnam and he was still in a military-like state, and without thinking removed the gun from the guy's hand, pushed him on the ground and started punching the guy in the throat. My grandpa didn't go to jail and the man with the gun loved. Even today my grandpa gets a kick thinking about the women screaming at my grandpap, "You're gonna kill him, you're gonna kill him." I didn't see this, but my French teacher has told this story a million times. My school has had trips to Europe before, and the French teacher and the art teacher, MRS, always go. MRS is one of the oldest teachers at my school, and she's the one everyone is afraid of. She's actually very nice and funny, but if you get on her bad side it's scary. I imagine people in public see her as some weird old lady they don't want to go near. One time on a Paris trip, a group of boys, probably around college age, groped a couple of the girls on the trip when they were off doing whatever. Later that day, when the whole group was together, the girls saw the group of boys and told MRS, "Hey, there's those boys that grabbed our butts." And she went fucking apeshit. She walked up to them and started screaming about how if they went near her girls again they were gonna feel her off. These kids didn't speak English very well and they thought she was pretty funny, so they laughed and walked away. Then she grabbed them by their shirts, pulled them up to her face and proceeded to scream her fucking head off at them. She's a pretty badass old woman. I finally have a place to put this. So, there was a girl in my school who ended up bullying me. Like real bullying. For 1/2-3 years. She and I are also on the same swim team. So when it reached a fever pitch, I ended up telling our coach. He sat us down and we filled it. As I unloaded all the things she did to me, she had no way to deny it. She broke down and began crying and kinda sitting in the fetal position. And our coach, who is the nicest person ever, dropped the big one. He said he was disappointed in her. That was harsh for him. Walking out of the back room smiling while she was red in the face and kinda still crying in front of her friends. Some pretty good stuff. Although I kinda did want to see more repercussions. Video of these dudes fucking with a guy on a bike. He gets off, knocks them both out clean, and rides off like it's nothing. I think it might be on our fight porn. And sure though. Was in a Canadian bar, foreign. I hit on some chick and she was digging me, but the guy that thought she was there with him wasn't enjoying the idea she was going home with me. He told me to F off and she told me he was just obsessed with her and they were nothing. He warned me I was F-king with the wrong guy while wearing a tap-out tee. Anyways, her and I were dancing and then the dude come out of nowhere and tries to king hit me. I was holding her at the time and the dude ended up knocking her out in my arms. Security saw the whole thing and jumped the guy. I just walked off back to the hotel alone. We had a vendor who showed up once a week and was a bit of a hand masher. Liked to crush your knuckles while shaking your hand. The boss had just hired a doughy looking, middle-aged guy for the sales department. I told him to be wary shaking the vendor's hand. A few days later the vendor shows up, puts his hand out to the new guy with a big smile, and goes in for the kill. At first everyone is smiling. The new guy is looking him in the eye while pumping his hand furiously. Then stops. The smile melts off the vendor's face. He had a pained look on his face as his lips pursed together. The vendor yelped a long "yeah" and dropped the new guy's hand like it was lava. Pulled the new guy aside and asked how he did that. 10 years I drove a tow truck. Must have changed thousands of flat tires with just hand tools. Nobody crushes my hand. Not exactly fucked with, but still a great story. My grandpa has the best. My grandpa is a white old man. Religious Muslim. Long white beard. Traditional hat. Really polite person. He looks more like old wise man in Japanese cartoons. But dresses really humble. You would think he is probably a really poor man. With his perhaps 20 years old hat, white beard and cane. Little everyone knows. He studied in the best high school and the university of the country. Speaks French, Arabic, Persian, English and Greek. Acted in theaters all his youth. Man of immense culture. So we went to doctor for his eye exam. Doctor wanted him to read something. Doc. Grandpa. Do you know how to read? Grandpa. Which language, my son? So in my university, people hazed the freshmen in all kinds of crazy ways. It was out of control for a period. Then one of the freshmen was a quiet, small, constantly smiling guy who was from a rural area on the India-China border. From a village where they had only 3 hours of electricity a day. He didn't speak much English or Hindi. One of the seniors targeted him and slapped him or something. Guy took it all smilingly. Then in the dead of the night, he waited till when the senior was all alone outside. Then dragged him into the woods and beat the fuck out of him. No one messed with him after that. When I was in 5th grade, some neighborhood bullies decided to pick on my younger brother, 4th grade, because he had a speech impediment. It got so bad that we started getting off at another bus stop and cutting through the woods. Sadly the bullies figured this out and would be waiting in our backyard when we got home. Fast forward a few weeks and my grandparents were in town. So we told them if the bullies showed up we would bang on the metal deck poles to let them know we were in trouble. Well, that afternoon sure enough the bullies were waiting. We immediately banged the poles and the kids said, "Oh, we know your grandparents are home. What are they going to do?" At this point my 72-year-old grandfather, who was a retired colonel from the Marines and served as a tank commander in the Pacific Theater during World War II and Korea, comes running out the back door with a metal baseball bat at a full sprint, threatening to Hulk smash anyone who doesn't immediately run. I'm fairly certain some or all were pissing themselves as they screamed, running away. Needless to say, we never got picked on again. Anytime a heckler tries to fuck with a comedian on stage. A heckler. A drunk guy girl yelling belligerent things without thought. A comedian. Someone whose job is to be quick, witty, funny. Those poor people never stand a chance. If anyone has never seen this before and wants to spend a few hours in a YouTube spiral, just search comedian owns heckler and proceed to enjoy some grade A justice served to assholes. There was this guy who was part of our group in college. He was an ass, but he was one of the guy's brothers, so he hung out with us a lot. Whenever he would get drunk he would try to pick fights. We would just shake it off and ignore him. One of the guys hosted a pretty big night party. As it goes, this dude got drunk and tried to pick fights again. People were getting uncomfortable. There was one guy at the party who was about 6'4" and built like a tank who was just not having it. He waited to be confronted and then immediately carried the guy outside and threw him down on a stair and broke his leg. He stopped picking fights after that. Dickhead bully screwed with a younger kid in high school who was super nice and a really good friend of mine. I didn't like it, so I got in the bully's face and told him I'd kick his ass. Well, we went at it and I absolutely got the shit kicked out of me. Fucking new judo or something. Yeah. I fucked with the wrong person. I'd do it again though. 7th grade science. Bully, almost more of a bully's henchman, said something about a quiet kid's mother. Quiet kid's mom was dead. Quiet kid also apparently studied boxing. Who knew? What did you say about my mom? Wham, what did you say about my mom? Wham. Bully henchman was so shocked he did nothing and took the 2 straight punches to his face. I don't think he got in trouble. Happened before the teacher came in. There was this guy who played drums all the time in Hawaii on the city strip. Nice guy. Never chatted much except for a wave and to throw him a few dollars. Some drunk tourist decided it would be fun to mess with his drums. Guy gave him so many chances to walk away. Drunk tourist wins up for a punch and the dude just knocked him out in one punch. I just stood there and my buddy had the presence of mind to tell the guy to pack his shit and leave before the cops come. Guy was pretty fucked up and we helped him till the ambulance came. I'm pretty sure with the way that his jaw looked it wouldn't be a short recovery. This guy, well, his subcontractors, does a lot of work for my local smallish city county, about $5 million worth of work last year. He has an autistic son and is a pretty nice, if super cheap, guy. This other subcontractor was kind of a piece of shit. Was one of those I'll say whatever I want cause my free speech. Well, on his second or third job, the boss stops by to check on stuff and drop off some materials. The sub starts running his mouth about stupid shit. And eventually starts telling retard jokes. The boss says, "You know I have an autistic son, right?" This was his perfect response. "Yup, I did. Sorry about your shitty luck." Dude hasn't done a single job for the city since. No other contractors will even toss him some work. Pretty sure his business is going under. He did shit work anyways. If you want to get nothing in return, you can like and join my Discord. There is a link in the description.